The legal dossier is already being compiled, and Prince William is done playing defense. After years of enduring what palace sources describe as a relentless assault on his character, his marriage, and the very institution he is destined to lead, the future king has reportedly instructed his legal team to document every single defamatory claim made by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle since 2020. This is not a warning shot across the bow. This is not a strongly worded statement through a spokesperson. This is William loading his legal arsenal and preparing for war. Palace insiders reveal that the Prince of Wales reached what they are calling an absolute breaking point after the latest round of allegations questioning everything from his temperament to the stability of his relationship with Catherine. One source close to the situation put it bluntly: he has tried the dignified silence. He has tried the private conversations. He has tried giving them space to exhaust themselves. None of it worked. They just kept going. And now they have pushed him past the point of no return. Legal experts have been consulted about the intricacies of United Kingdom defamation laws and the complicated matter of international jurisdiction. Because here is the thing, folks. Harry and Meghan have made their accusations from American soil through American publishers and American television networks, which creates a legal labyrinth that would make most people's heads spin. But William's team is not deterred. They are mapping out every possible avenue, every potential court, every jurisdiction where the Sussexes might be held accountable for their words. Let us be brutally honest here. This is no longer about two brothers who had a falling out over wedding tensions or disagreements about duty. This is about the heir to the throne treating his younger brother as an existential threat to the crown itself. Sources close to William describe his mindset as cold and calculated, the approach of a man who has accepted that the brother he grew up with, the brother he protected after their mother died, has become an adversary who must be dealt with accordingly. The shift in palace strategy is nothing short of seismic. For decades, the royal family has operated under the mantra of never complain, never explain, absorbing public criticism and private betrayal with stoic silence. But that era, according to multiple insiders, is officially over. King Charles has allegedly given his blessing for William to explore every legal option available, a remarkable development that signals just how thoroughly the Sussexes have burned every bridge back to the family fold. One royal correspondent who has covered the family for over 2 decades described the mood inside palace walls as unlike anything in modern memory. There is genuine anger there, not the performative kind we sometimes see leak out, but deep, cold, institutional fury. The calculation has shifted from how do we keep the peace to how do we protect the monarchy from further damage. But the specific allegations that finally pushed William over the edge are even more personal than the public realizes, and what his legal team has uncovered in their review of Harry's own words could turn this entire battle on its head. The evidence has been accumulating for years, building into a mountain of claims that legal experts say crosses well beyond acceptable public commentary into actionable defamation territory. From the explosive Oprah Winfrey interview in March of 2021 to the 6-hour Netflix documentary series Harry and Meghan, from the memoir Spare that aired every conceivable piece of dirty laundry to the podcast appearances and subsequent interviews, the Sussexes have constructed what palace lawyers are now describing as a pattern of deliberate character assassination against the future king and his family. William previously resisted any aggressive response, adhering to the traditional royal approach of weathering storms in dignified silence, but sources indicate that King Charles himself has come to view this strategy as increasingly untenable. One insider revealed that Charles told William directly that there comes a point where silence is not strength but surrender. The king apparently reminded his son that their ancestor Henry VIII would have had far less patience with such public attacks, a historical reference that drew a rare laugh from the embattled prince but underscored the seriousness of their discussions. The fundamental change in palace thinking cannot be overstated. For generations, the royal family accepted that public criticism was simply part of the bargain, the price paid for lives of extraordinary privilege. But Harry and Meghan have exploited this tradition ruthlessly, knowing that every accusation they launched would be met with institutional silence that many observers interpreted as tacit admission of guilt. One communications expert who has advised multiple royal households explained the dilemma perfectly. The royals trained themselves to never punch down, never engage with critics, never dignify attacks with responses. The Sussexes figured this out and have been taking advantage of it ever since. Allow me to translate what this shift really means. The palace is no longer treating Harry as a troubled family member who might eventually come to his senses. They are treating him as an adversary whose statements must be countered, documented, and potentially challenged in court. The personal relationship, whatever tattered remains of it still existed, has been sacrificed on the altar of institutional protection. William, according to those who know him best, has made peace with this reality, even if it causes him private anguish. What makes this development particularly striking is the blessing from King Charles, a man who has spent years attempting to maintain some thread of connection with his younger son. Sources describe a father who has finally accepted that his attempts at reconciliation have been repeatedly weaponized against the family. Every private conversation gets leaked. One palace aide noted with evident frustration, "Every gesture of goodwill gets twisted into another talking point about how cold and unfeeling the royals are. At some point you have to stop giving them ammunition." The tease of what pushed William past his breaking point has tantalized royal watchers for weeks. What could possibly be worse than the allegations already made public, the claims of racism, the accusations of physical violence, the suggestions that Catherine deliberately made Meghan cry? The answer, according to multiple sources familiar with the legal review, involves claims made in private settings that have made their way back to the palace through third parties, claims that attack William and Catherine at the most personal level imaginable. But the specific accusations that reportedly reduced Catherine to tears reveal just how far Harry and Meghan have allegedly gone in their campaign against the future king and queen. One particular allegation from recent months reportedly left Catherine so upset that she had to leave a private meeting to compose herself. Sources would not specify the exact nature of the claim, but described it as an attack on her fitness as a mother and the stability of her mental health during her cancer treatment. Let that sink in for a moment. While Catherine was fighting for her life against a devastating diagnosis, while the entire nation held its breath hoping for her recovery, Harry and Meghan were allegedly making private claims about her psychological state to their circle of celebrity friends, claims that inevitably found their way back to the palace. The accusations Harry made in Spare about William leaking stories to the press have been particularly galling to the Prince of Wales and his team. In the memoir, Harry explicitly accused his brother of strategic media manipulation, suggesting that William's office routinely traded favorable coverage for exclusive stories about the Sussexes. Palace sources call this allegation not only false but provably so. One senior aide stated flatly that they have contemporaneous documentation, internal communications, and witness statements that directly contradict what Harry wrote. Under oath in a discovery process, they are confident his claims would collapse entirely. Then there is the physical altercation story, perhaps the most explosive revelation in the entire book. Harry described William allegedly grabbing him by the collar and throwing him to the ground during an argument at Nottingham Cottage, leaving him with visible injuries. The portrayal painted William as an aggressor with anger management issues, a man capable of physical violence against his own brother. Sources close to William describe his reaction to this passage as a combination of fury and devastation. He felt betrayed on a level that is difficult to articulate. One friend revealed, not just because of what was said, but because Harry took a private moment, whatever actually happened, and turned it into tabloid fodder for profit. The claims about Catherine and Meghan's relationship have been subjected to particular scrutiny by the legal team. Harry's version of the infamous bridesmaid dress incident, in which he eventually admitted that Meghan made Catherine cry rather than the reverse, still contained what palace sources describe as complete fabrications about the context and aftermath. One insider put it bluntly, Harry changed his story from what Meghan originally told Oprah, admitted the crying was the other way around, but then surrounded that admission with so many additional false claims that the overall narrative remained just as damaging. But here is where the legal team believes they have discovered something potentially devastating to Harry's credibility. In compiling their dossier of claims, lawyers noticed significant contradictions between what Harry said in different interviews, between what appeared in Spare versus what was stated to Oprah, between early accounts and later versions of the same events. One legal expert consulted by the palace explained the significance. Inconsistent statements are the death of a defamation defense. If you cannot keep your own story straight, a jury will question whether any of it is true. The discovery process in a defamation case could force Harry to explain these contradictions under oath, to produce whatever evidence he claims to have for his accusations, to name the sources he has cited anonymously in his various accounts. For a man who has repeatedly refused to specify who made the alleged comments about Archie's skin color, the prospect of being legally compelled to answer such questions represents a nightmare scenario. But the legal strategy being developed goes far beyond addressing individual claims, and what palace lawyers are constructing could expose the Sussexes to consequences they never imagined. William's legal team is not approaching this as a single lawsuit over one particular defamatory statement. Sources reveal they are building a case for what lawyers call a pattern of defamation, a sustained campaign of false accusations that have collectively damaged the future king's reputation, and by extension the institution of the monarchy itself. This approach is legally sophisticated and strategically devastating, because it treats the Sussexes' media blitz as a coordinated attack rather than isolated incidents. United Kingdom defamation law is notoriously favorable to claimants, a fact that Harry surely understood when he chose to publish Spare through a British publisher and grant interviews to British media outlets. Unlike American law, where the plaintiff must prove falsity, UK law places the burden of proof squarely on the defendant. Harry would have to prove that every claim he made was true, not merely that he believed it to be true or that someone told him it was true. The legal standard is actual truth, documented and demonstrable. Legal experts consulted by the palace have laid out what a discovery process might entail, and it is comprehensive enough to make any defendant nervous. Harry would be required to produce all communications relevant to the claims in his book, including text messages, emails, and any written notes from conversations. He would need to identify every source he quoted anonymously and provide evidence corroborating their accounts. Perhaps most significantly, he would have to submit to deposition questioning about every allegation, unable to hide behind carefully crafted statements or sympathetic interviewers. One defamation specialist who reviewed the potential case explained the bind Harry would face. He has made very specific accusations against very specific people. Under UK law, he must prove them. Saying "I believe this happened" or "someone told me this happened" is not sufficient. He needs documentation, witnesses who will testify under oath, and contemporaneous evidence. Without that, the claims are actionable. The implications of such exposure are staggering. Private communications between Harry and Meghan could be compelled as evidence. Messages with their friends, staff, and media contacts might become part of the court record. The sources they have claimed to have, the insiders they have quoted, the witnesses to conversations they have described, would all be subject to verification. For a couple who has carefully controlled their narrative through friendly interviews and their own productions, the prospect of hostile legal scrutiny represents an existential threat to their credibility. Sources close to the palace legal team describe a methodical approach that has been months in development. Every statement from Harry and Meghan has been cataloged, cross-referenced with available evidence, and evaluated for legal actionability. One aide familiar with the process said it resembles an academic research project as much as legal preparation. They have timelines, they have direct quotes matched against provable facts, they have identified witnesses who can testify to what actually happened versus what the Sussexes claimed happened. But there is one particular weakness in the Sussex position that the legal team identified. A vulnerability that Harry apparently never considered when he was pouring his heart out to his ghostwriter. Harry's charitable work, long considered his greatest strength and most unassailable public relations asset, may become unexpected leverage in this looming legal battle. The Invictus Games, the athletic competition for wounded veterans that Harry founded in 2014, has been his signature accomplishment, the one initiative that even his harshest critics acknowledge as genuinely valuable. But sources suggest William is acutely aware that any legal action timed around major Invictus events would maximize pressure on his brother while minimizing public sympathy for the defendant. Reports have emerged of organizational issues within the Invictus Games Foundation, including alleged dysfunction in leadership and questions about financial management. While none of these reports have been substantiated through official channels, the mere existence of such scrutiny creates vulnerability for Harry at precisely the moment he can least afford it. One palace insider acknowledged the strategic calculation with unusual candor. Nobody wants to damage a charity that helps veterans, but Harry has weaponized his charitable work as a shield against criticism for years. If legal action proceeds, he may find that shield less impenetrable than he assumed. The potential impact on Harry's reputation as a humanitarian extends beyond Invictus itself. His charitable partnerships with major corporations, his speaking engagements at wellness conferences, his positioning as a mental health advocate all depend on public perception of his character. A defamation lawsuit, regardless of its ultimate outcome, would dominate headlines for months or years, associating his name with legal controversy rather than charitable good works. Corporate sponsors tend to be extremely risk-averse, one marketing executive observed. Nobody wants their brand associated with a lawsuit, even if the person being sued might ultimately prevail. Sources close to the palace suggest that timing any legal action around major Invictus events is not merely strategic but almost inevitable. Harry's charitable calendar provides the framework for his public appearances and media opportunities, which means any significant legal filing would naturally intersect with foundation activities. Whether this represents deliberate pressure or unavoidable scheduling, the effect would be the same. Harry would face questions about defamation lawsuits at events intended to celebrate wounded warriors. The legal team has also considered how charitable work might factor into any eventual settlement or judgment. If Harry were found liable for defamation, damages could theoretically impact his ability to fund charitable activities. One legal analyst noted that courts sometimes consider a defendant's financial obligations when structuring payments, but they do not exempt someone from consequences simply because they do good works elsewhere. Damn, that is a cold legal reality for someone who has positioned himself as a professional philanthropist. What makes this situation particularly delicate is the genuine value of Invictus to veterans worldwide. Nobody in the palace wants to see that mission compromised by family warfare, according to sources familiar with internal discussions, but equally they argue, Harry's decision to repeatedly attack the royal family while hiding behind his charitable credentials should not provide indefinite immunity from accountability. But insiders reveal that while Harry's exposure is significant, the legal team may have an even even more important target in their sights. Legal experts advising the palace are reportedly more interested in Meghan's public statements than in Harry's memoir. The reasoning is both strategic and substantive. While Spare contain the most detailed accusations, Meghan's interviews have included claims that are arguably more inflammatory and, crucially, potentially easier to disprove. One legal consultant explained the calculation. Harry can claim he is sharing his perspective, his experience, his truth. Meghan made factual assertions about palace protocols, staff behavior, and institutional responses that are either accurate or they are not. The Oprah Winfrey interview remains the crown jewel of potential legal exposure. Meghan's claims about concerns regarding Archie's skin color were presented as factual, specific, and damning, yet she has never identified who allegedly made such comments, when they occurred, or the precise wording used. The palace kept receipts, according to one source with knowledge of the legal review. There are contemporaneous notes, there are witnesses, there are documented conversations that tell a very different story than what was presented to Oprah's audience of 50 million viewers. Equally significant are Meghan's statements about seeking mental health support and allegedly being told it would not look good for the institution. Palace sources have produced what they describe as extensive documentation of mental health resources offered to Meghan, including the names of professionals she was connected with and records of appointments that were arranged. One insider noted with evident frustration that they offered her every possible support and have the documentation to prove it, but she went on international television and suggested she was abandoned. Her podcast appearances and subsequent interviews have allegedly provided additional material for the legal dossier. Statements about palace staff behavior, claims about wedding protocols, assertions about media arrangements, all have been cataloged and cross-referenced against available evidence. Legal advisors have identified what they consider significant discrepancies between Meghan's public statements and documentable reality. The question of whether Meghan could be named separately in any legal action adds complexity to the palace strategy. Naming her directly would invite accusations of targeting a woman of color, playing into the Sussexes' preferred framing of any criticism as racially motivated. However, legal experts note that excluding her from accountability when she made specific defamatory statements would be both legally unusual and practically ineffective. One attorney explained that in defamation cases, you pursue those who made the statements. If the wife made separate actionable claims from the husband, she would logically be a separate defendant. Sources describe the legal team's approach to Meghan's statements as methodical rather than vindictive. They are not interested in persecution, one insider emphasized. They are interested in accountability for specific false claims that have damaged specific people. The goal is correction, retraction, and prevention of future defamation, not personal destruction. But the Sussexes are not sitting idle as these legal storm clouds gather, and their response to the threat reveals just how seriously they are taking it. Harry and Meghan are allegedly panicked by reports of the legal preparations, and sources indicate they have engaged crisis public relations teams to assess their options. The couple, who have always prided themselves on controlling their narrative, now find themselves in the unfamiliar position of playing defense against an adversary with vastly greater resources and institutional support. One PR professional familiar with crisis management described their situation as extremely challenging. When you have spent years making accusations, and someone finally calls your bluff with legal force, there are no easy answers. Reports have emerged of attempted back-channel communications to the palace, informal outreach through mutual friends and former connections, seeking to gauge whether some accommodation might be reached before formal legal proceedings begin. These overtures have been firmly rejected, according to multiple sources. One palace insider stated bluntly that the time for private resolution passed years ago. They chose to make their accusations publicly. Any accountability will also be public. The door to quiet family mediation has closed permanently. Meghan's rumored plans for a United Kingdom return, possibly in connection with her new Netflix cooking show or other professional ventures, are now being viewed through an entirely different lens. What might have been positioned as an olive branch, a softening of her stance toward the country she once called home, now appears to some observers as a potential legal strategy. One royal commentator suggested that appearing conciliatory before any lawsuit is filed could be an attempt to shape public perception in advance of legal hostilities. Sources claim the Sussexes are exploring whether American freedom of speech protections could shield them from United Kingdom defamation law. The legal picture here is complicated and not particularly encouraging for the couple. While American courts are generally reluctant to enforce foreign defamation judgments, the Sussexes' business interests in the United Kingdom, their use of British publishers and media outlets, and their ongoing connections to British entities create multiple points of legal vulnerability. One international law expert noted that they cannot simply ignore UK courts while continuing to do business in UK markets. At some point, they would face enforcement mechanisms. The couple's financial situation adds another layer of pressure. Despite their Netflix and Spotify deals, their ventures have not generated the ongoing revenue streams many expected. A protracted legal battle would be extraordinarily expensive, requiring constant attention from high-priced lawyers while simultaneously damaging the brand partnerships that provide their income. One entertainment industry analyst observed that legal controversy is kryptonite for celebrity brands. Nobody wants to sponsor someone who is in and out of court. But William has reportedly prepared a response that could neutralize any public relations counteroffensive the Sussexes might mount. For the first time in this long-running family drama, King Charles is allegedly fully backing William's aggressive approach without reservation or qualification. The days of the king attempting to maintain channels of communication with his younger son while his heir built a separate legal strategy appear to be over. Sources describe a unified front within the palace that would have been unimaginable even 12 months ago. A complete alignment of the king, the Prince of Wales, and their respective households. Queen Camilla has reportedly made her position unambiguously clear. According to sources, she is done with attempts to broker peace after watching repeated Sussex attacks on the family she has worked so hard to be accepted by. One insider described her attitude as protective maternal fury, anger not just on behalf of her stepchildren, but on behalf of the institution she will serve as queen consort. Camilla apparently told confidants that she watched the Sussexes nearly destroy Charles's reputation with their accusations, and she will not stand by while they attempt the same with William. Palace staff have been compiling a comprehensive timeline of every promise Harry broke regarding private family matters, from his stated commitment to keep personal discussions confidential to his assurances that he would not commercially exploit his royal connections. The documentation allegedly demonstrates a consistent pattern of broken faith. This timeline is intended not merely for legal purposes but for public release, should the Sussexes attempt to frame any lawsuit as royal bullying or persecution. The question of how legal action would affect Harry's position in the line of succession has generated significant discussion among royal experts. While removing someone from the succession requires an act of parliament and is therefore extremely unlikely, sources suggest that a finding of defamation could accelerate other changes to Harry's status. Counselor of State responsibilities, any remaining ceremonial roles, the few threads still connecting him to official royal life could all be severed with considerably less legal complexity than altering the succession itself. One constitutional expert noted that the palace has limited tools for formally distancing a rogue royal, but legal victory would provide moral authority for whatever steps they chose to take. If a court finds that Harry defamed his brother, the palace would have unprecedented justification for any measures they implemented afterward. The legal finding would transform the narrative from family dispute to one side being officially determined to have lied. The unified stance extends to communication strategy. Palace sources indicate that any legal filing would be accompanied by extensive documentation released to the media, ensuring that the public understood precisely what claims were being challenged and what evidence contradicted those claims. This represents a dramatic departure from traditional royal discretion, but sources argue that extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. They have realized that discretion was being used against them, one insider explained. By staying silent, they allowed false narratives to solidify into accepted truth. But the financial implications of legal proceedings for the Sussexes could prove more damaging than any court ruling. Royal experts have begun speculating about how this legal confrontation might ultimately conclude, and the scenarios range from humiliating public retractions to financial settlements that could devastate the Sussex household. One thing virtually all analysts agree on is that if formal legal proceedings commence, there will be no quiet resolution. This will play out in headlines, in court filings, in witness testimony, and in eventual rulings that become part of the permanent historical record. The fate of Spare itself hangs in the balance. Legal action could potentially force the publisher to add corrections, disclaimers, or even pull the book from shelves entirely pending resolution of defamation claims. Publishers carry their own liability for defamatory content, and Random House's legal team is surely reviewing their exposure with increasing concern. One publishing industry expert noted that correction demands or pulping orders are rare but not unprecedented when books contain demonstrably false claims about identifiable individuals. If the palace prevails on even some of their claims, the publisher would face difficult decisions. Harry's ongoing security case and his American visa status could become unexpectedly complicated by legal proceedings. In Spare, he admitted to drug use including cocaine, marijuana, and psychedelic mushrooms. This admission has already triggered questions about whether he answered visa application questions truthfully, since such applications typically require disclosure of drug use. Under oath in a defamation proceeding, Harry might face questions about these admissions and their implications. One immigration attorney observed that lying on a visa application is grounds for revocation, and testimony in a legal proceeding could create documentation of discrepancies that did not previously exist in official form. The monarchy's calculation appears to be weighing short-term scandal against long-term precedent. Yes, a lawsuit would generate negative headlines and keep the Sussex drama in the news for months or years, but sources suggest William has concluded that the alternative is worse. Allowing defamatory claims to stand unchallenged establishes a precedent that anyone can attack the royal family with impunity. Future disgruntled relatives, former staff members, or opportunistic observers would understand that there are no consequences for false accusations. One royal historian placed the situation in broader context. The The monarchy has survived for 1,000 years by adapting to threats. In previous centuries, those threats were military or political. Today, the threats are reputational and informational. William apparently understands that protecting the institution requires meeting threats where they exist, even if that means unprecedented legal action against family. The irony is absolutely staggering when you consider it. Harry left the royal family claiming he wanted privacy and freedom from media scrutiny. He has instead created a situation where his private communications may be subpoenaed, his personal finances may be exposed through discovery, and his every public statement may be subjected to legal examination. He sought escape from the institution and instead has bound himself to it more completely than ever through adversarial legal proceedings. But there is one outcome that neither the palace nor the Sussexes may have fully considered, a consequence that could reshape the monarchy itself. The irreversible damage to the brothers' relationship, if formal legal proceedings begin, cannot be overstated or recovered from. While sources close to both William and Harry have long suggested the relationship was damaged beyond repair, the initiation of a lawsuit would transform emotional estrangement into formal legal adversary status. There would be no path back, no possibility of future reconciliation, no chance that time might heal what accusations had wounded. A lawsuit creates a permanent record, permanent sides, and permanent consequences. No senior royal in modern history has ever sued a family member. Let that sink in for a moment. Through generations of scandals, betrayals, abdications, and family ruptures that make the current situation look tame by comparison, no heir to the throne has ever taken a sibling to court. The Duke of Windsor, who actually abandoned his duties to marry an American divorcee, was never subjected to legal action by his brother George VI, despite the constitutional crisis he created. The precedent William would set is genuinely unprecedented. What this potential lawsuit reveals about William's vision for his future reign is perhaps the most significant aspect of this entire saga. This is a king in waiting who has decided that the old ways of quiet suffering and dignified silence no longer serve the institution he will lead. He is signaling that under his reign, attacks on the crown will not go unanswered, that those who seek to profit by damaging the monarchy will face consequences, that the shield of family connection will not protect those who weaponize that connection for personal gain. The monarchy William seems intent on building is one that fights back, that defends itself, that treats its reputation as an asset worth protecting through every available legal means. Whether this represents evolution or departure from tradition depends entirely on your perspective. Some will see strength and necessary adaptation, others will see the abandonment of grace that once made the royals untouchable above petty disputes. For Harry and Meghan, the coming months will determine whether their strategy of attacking the institution while cashing in on their connection to it was brilliant entrepreneurship or catastrophic miscalculation. They bet that the palace would never respond, that the tradition of silence would protect them while they monetize their grievances. That bet appears to have been spectacularly wrong. Do you think William should pursue legal action, or would it give Harry and Meghan exactly the attention they want? The argument cuts both ways, and reasonable people can disagree. What is undeniable is that the relationship between these brothers, once so close that William asked Harry to be his best man, has become something neither could have imagined on that day when they walked together behind their mother's coffin. Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you will not believe what is coming next.